Welcome to the Momentum Lifestyle Podcast, where every Monday we interview an inspiring, educational and entertaining guest to help you build confidence, find balance and live a life of impact. We'd like to thank our sponsor today, Be Spunky. Now, Blake, Gino and myself have been using their Reboot product for well over 6 months now, and it has been life-changing. I found myself recovering faster, having way more energy throughout the day, and honestly feeling just more jacked up as a man. And this is because Reboot is clinically formulated to support healthy male hormone levels, providing stress relief, improved strength and stamina, enhanced drive, and overall well-being. Be Spunky Reboot contains a proprietary blend of 10 natural and organic herbs and active ingredients that are renowned for helping men to enhance physical and cognitive performance, improve stamina, energy and endurance, optimize testosterone levels, support healthy reproductive function, support cardiovascular function, relieve stress, mild anxiety, irritability, relieve tiredness, fatigue, support healthy sleep patterns, and support healthy body weight. So as you can see, it is a must-have product for all men. So head to their website, bespunky.com.au. That's bespunki.com.au, and use the code MOMENTUM to receive 10% off all Be Spunky products.
Paul Roos, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Blake. How are you?
Very, very well. Thanks for joining us. Wanted to talk all things culture, leadership, and behaviour, which you do best. But for those that know me, they know I'm a fair frother of the demons. So I thought we could start there briefly, and would love your insights into what you think as an outsider has got them the premiership, and also even your journey with them, which I know you got a lot of accolades and deserving accolades for what has happened over the last couple of months in terms of them winning the flag. But what was the state of that club kind of when you walked in, and what had to happen over, is it a 7 or 8 year period for them to finally win the premiership, do you think?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's well documented by Peter Jackson, I guess Glenn Bartley, even Nathan Jones, Max Gawn, some of the guys who were there. It was a really tough situation to walk into, and then the players, they'd won 2 games the year before. They'd lost, 6 or 7 years in a row, particularly Nathan Jones, who was, the sort of spiritual leader at the time. Jack Grimes, Jack Trengove, the 2 young captains, was really difficult for them. So, we started from the ground up. But Peter Jackson, who was the CEO at the time, was really honest about that, told exactly the way it was. But I think it's a classic case of so many people contributing. What Peter did really well was was Glenn Bart was on board as the chairman. You got good chairman, good board, good CEO, football manager and Josh Marnie, but learning, really good person, Jason Taylor, Todd Viney. So when I look back, and then I brought in Georgie Stone, Daniel McPherson, who was still there up until North Melbourne got him, Benny Matthews, Brett Allison, Jade Rawlings was there, Dave Misson, fantastic. So I think it was just what I realised is just the collective and how much work. It's a bit like building a house. What we did back 8 years ago was put the foundations in, really started from scratch, to be honest. And then by the time I left, we'd gone from 2 wins to 10 wins. And then you get talent level, and improved significantly. Jason Taylor and the crew's done a great job. The next 2 years were up, prelim final. And then I think, like anything, you got to find your way a little bit. I think the players lost their way from what I can tell, hearing, Max and hearing Simon Goodwin talk and knowing a few of the people, they dropped their standards, which you can't do. If you want to be a premiership team, you've got to have really high standards, you've got to have high accountability. And then I think they made a decision, and most clubs have to do that. The players themselves have to make the decision. Do we want to be great or don't we? Do we want to play our role? Do we want to hold each other accountable to high standards? The talent was there. The foundation was there. The people were there. It was really a matter of just making that decision, which they didn't want to do for the previous 2 years. And then they decided, we do. It means a lot to us. And, a lot of hard work, a lot of good people. And it's fantastic to see them, win a premiership, particularly for the fans. The players had been there a long period of time. It was incredibly exciting.
When you walk into a club like that, and with all respects, it did appear to be, as a long-suffering fan, a fair shit show when you walked in. Like, you're obviously talking about the team and I say the team on a bigger scale in terms of everyone that's involved with the board and everything. From your side of things, on a micro level, so that's somewhat the macro. What does the micro look like when, I'm guessing, the standards, the culture, everything was pretty average? Like, what does day one even look like when you're starting on such a big project?
Yeah, you're right. Look, to be fair, I think what Peter had done and Glenn had done, and even Dave Misson and some of the medical stuff, the standards weren't too bad, Monday to Friday. The biggest thing was just that complete lack of understanding of how to play AFL football. That's probably the thing that struck me first and foremost. When they got on the field, they just had no idea how hard it was to win a game of football. The things that they had to do both defensively around the ball. So, the good thing was the previous probably 12 months, a lot of the stuff that I thought I might have to do, I didn't really have to do. So then it allowed us as a coaching group to purely and simply focus on, putting a leadership group together, putting a behavioural code together, picking a leadership group, educating the leadership group, and then really just going through the vision week in, week out, and absolutely explaining to the players, if you want to be a great team, you have to do that. And probably a couple of players that, probably haven't got the credit they deserve, Daniel Cross and Bernie Vince. Getting Daniel Cross to come into that footy club was pivotal. Just his standards on game day, Bernie Vince, his standards on game day, just their ability to drive the group, and for the group to look at a couple of role models and say, okay, that's how hard you have to work. Daniel Cross is 31 and he's our hardest working player. Okay, we showed a lot of his vision, of Sydney when we played Sydney, of what Kieran Jack did, Daniel Hanbury did, Jared McVeigh did. So it was really more of an educational piece purely on game day and just rebuilding the whole game plan, which, took a while, but we knew it was going to take a while. But they were willing and they wanted to learn, and they were good people. That was the main thing. You're dealing with good people, and then we gradually added talent over the 3-year period and got to a situation where we were knocking on the door of the finals, which was great.
One of the great stories that I love, and you and I have spoken about it before, but those that aren't aware of it, is the Bloods culture. And I'll talk about the Demons culture in a sec. But for those that aren't aware of the Bloods culture, which you talk about in your book, what is that, and what was the culture made up of in terms of the behaviours or the standards?
Yeah, look, it was slightly different, and we'll touch on Melbourne in a minute. I mean, when I was at Sydney, I played at Sydney, so I already had relationships. I think the missing piece at Sydney was a little bit around two things. We had to set really clear standards, but then there's also this period when you mentioned the Bloods. We probably had no connection or no identity. The players didn't really understand exactly where they came from. Sydney was the Sydney Swans, but it came from South Melbourne. And I think it was Heath James, his dad, Max James, had played for the club. And once we set our behaviours and our standards and our values, we were sort of looking for an organic or a natural sort of catch cry. It didn't have to be. And then I think it was James, he said, well, what about the Bloods? Which was really turned out to be really important, because it was really a connection to the past. But the most important thing were the values and the behaviours. And I've never really released them because they haven't really become public. I don't think anyone's written a book and put them in. I can't remember. But the good thing was, we picked our leadership group, and our leadership group was fantastic from day one. Stewie Maxfield driving the standards, and the Bloods became the catch cry, but the standards and the behaviours and the leadership group were the ones that drove it. And over a 3-year period, it was really good. Melbourne was interesting. We almost had to let go of the past. And that was the interesting thing between the two clubs. I remember walking into Melbourne, I had that much stuff on the walls, and I said to Josh Marty, mate, can we get all this stuff down? This is ridiculous. We have to create our own identity at the Melbourne Footy Club. The Premiership Cup's fantastic, and the history never goes away. But I felt that club was just mired in history and didn't want to move forward. So it was actually quite interesting, the dynamic between the two footy clubs. The process was similar, but we probably had to connect with South Melbourne, and we had to not disconnect's not the right word, but we had to forge our own identity at Melbourne, because we were so immersed in the past. The great Sparassi and and the Robbie Flower, and really great players. Coaches, Norm Smith. We're probably just too immersed in the past, so we had to move forward, understanding that was an incredibly important part of the culture, which it would always go. But what was this team's identity going to be? So they were a little bit different, but in terms of the process moving forward, once we'd established our culture code, it was very similar.
You talk about kind of behaviours and values, and we won't necessarily go into the Swans ones if they haven't been released as such, but you spoke about a couple of the old heads with Maxwell and Cross leading the way. What does that look like in terms of filtering that down from, your 31, 32, 33-year-olds down to 18-year-olds? Is it literally showing them footage? Is it, what does that look like in terms of actually implementing those standards onto the rest of the crew?
I mean, firstly, just the distinction, which I'll go into, which is really important. Most companies have values, but the problem with values, honesty to you might be different to honesty to me. Roosie, Blake, I asked you, did we have a meeting last week? And you said no. But I just found out through someone else we had a meeting. Our value is honesty. Your response could be, look, Roosie, you didn't need to be in the meeting. That's why I didn't tell you. Yeah, but hang on, mate. I asked you whether it's on and you said it wasn't on. Now, that's honesty. So we're going to have a debate about that. Yeah, but mate, I just didn't think you need to be in it, so I want to be honest. Tell the truth is an action, okay? So you didn't tell the truth. I asked you a direct question. So there's a clear distinction between a value and a behaviour. All right. So once you establish your behaviours, whether it's at Melbourne, whether it's at the Swans, or whether it's in your corporate space, then it's easy to hold people accountable. All right. Depending on what those behaviours are, then you're educating the players around, well, what does deliver on your word look like if that's one of your behaviours? Well, it means do what you say you're going to do. If you say you're going to be training at 8:30 and we're going to start training, that's when you're there. So it's easier then to hold people accountable. Game day, we have our technical skills, and at Sydney, I think I've released this before, was tackle percentage, fumbles, goals against, uncontested possession against, and contested possession. They were our technical skills, but then our behaviours. So once you marry them together, you can be really clear on what you're rewarding and what you're challenging. In terms of game day, if you want to be an accountable midfield, there's no better person than Daniel Cross. Nathan Jones, this is what, have a look at Cross here. He's just left the stoppage. He's beat his man defensively. He's made a tackle. He's got the ball. He's kicked it to someone and he's beat his man to the next contest. That's a two-way running midfield. Right? So you can be really a lot clearer on how you're going to educate your players and your staff from a corporate point of view.
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, and I'm sure you can articulate this better, it felt like for the Ds, it was a case of tidying up defensively in that first year in terms of not leaking fucking 240 points every week. Was that in your head of a 3-year plan of let's get behaviours and culture in year one and tidy up defensively? Was that somewhat of a plan that you broke down?
Yeah, we knew we couldn't do everything at once. And the great thing was bringing 4 of the Swans coaches. The first thing is you've got to win your own footy. It's probably one of the only games in the world that goes from contest to contest. All right. So your ability to win your own football is really important. So we worked hard on that. And regardless of what some people want to tell you, most of the time in world sport, the best defensive teams win. Now, that's not to say you don't want to score, but defence is more controllable. You and I are going to be different in terms of our skill level of football, but we can both tackle. We can both cover the ground to chase someone. We can both. So that's a non-negotiable. So that's the reason why we pick contested ball and defence at the start. Now, that's not to say we didn't work on offense, but we had to be really sharp on a contested ball, really sharp on defence. I think when I first arrived, it was points against were 120. And we got it down by 5 goals, which was amazing in the first year. But it was hard to score because they were putting so much energy into stopping the opposition. And this gets back to what I spoke about earlier. They just didn't know how to work hard. So they're working really hard. And then I said, guys, we've got the ball now. We've got to do something with it. Yeah, but I'm bloody tired. I know you, because you're working a lot harder than what you were before. So yeah, and I look, if I hadn't have had the Swans experience, there's no way known I could have coached Melbourne. Yeah, just wouldn't have. And I really understood once I got there why Peter Jackson was adamant to get a senior coach, and they could never have put a young coach in that. And I only say that, not only because of my experience, but the fact that I was able to bring in George Stone, Ben Matthews, Daniel McPherson, Brett Allison, and also manage the staff and understanding what Dave Misson was really good at, helping the medical staff, really clear. Josh Marnie, a young coach couldn't possibly done it, but understanding the steps to become a premiership team certainly helped over that 3-year period. And then gradually we had to score more. But what we see now is if you're really quick in defence, you turn defence into attack really quickly, score off turnovers, get in behind the ball really quickly. And that's Melbourne's method this year, which has been fantastic.
Darren Burgess, I was listening to a podcast a couple of weeks ago, him talking about the collective unity amongst the coaching staff. When you're coming into an organisation like that, what does leadership, culture and behaviour need to look like from you as a coach, from the senior members, and then of the team? And how does that conversation go? Is it you guys coming together? I think one of the things that you talk about is it needs to be player driven, the standards, to get buy-in. But what does that process look like when you're literally doing an overhaul of behaviours, culture and leadership?
Yeah, so it's really the players and coaches in together and establishing the ground rules, more for the players, but the coaches have their code as well. But again, this is a strange thing about football. If you look at Melbourne, for instance, and most clubs, if you're going to get your first coaching gig, it's and you look at it from a business point of view. Blake, I want you to buy this car dealership. It's losing $10 million a year, and you have to take all the staff that have run it into the ground. No one would buy the business. Yet we ask coaches to do that all the time. And I guarantee I would not have taken the job. And this is no disrespect to any of the coaches that would have been there, but I wouldn't have taken the job had Melbourne said, you've got to take these coaches. It's just a ridiculous notion to say, well, you got to keep these guys. And they run the thing into the ground. Now I'm using it as I'm exaggerating slightly.
Analogy, yeah.
I'm using it as an analogy. So my point is, it's a lot easier when you're bringing in coaches that understand behaviours and understand that they're first and foremost the role models, understand what we have to drive as a coaching group, that we have to build really strong relationships with the players, that we're in this together. It's not the players versus the coaches, which used to be a little bit back in the 80s. It's a collective group of people trying to create something together. And we're going to have some tough conversations, but they've got to know, Nathan Jones has got to know that I'm in it with him. That we're rowing this boat together. And if you don't have coaches that have done that and are aware of that, it becomes really, really difficult to do. So the ability to bring those coaches in was really, really important.
What is, you mentioned tough conversations, and one of the avenues within Performance by Design, which is your kind of culture and leadership business that you run mainly for corporates, is a really significant part of that, which is called Real Talk. What is Real Talk, and how do you implement that within a company organisation, and how would you have kind of implemented it in a footy scenario as well?
The level of accountability in football is just off the charts. It really is. You get feedback at quarter time, half time, 3/4 time, post game. You then come in Monday, you do your team review, everyone in it together. Then you come in and do your individual review. So, and that's the difference between the corporate world and often we review and preview. Then by Wednesday you get to the preview. So the real talk is conversations, just constant conversations around. And my view is, if I don't give you feedback, then I don't care about you. I don't understand this notion in the corporate world that we don't give feedback. If I care about the company, I care about you, I'm giving the feedback from the heart, okay? I'm giving you the feedback because I care about you and I want you to get better. And corporates are really scared about feedback. I just don't understand it. Being in the footy world for 40 years, we thrive on feedback. The whole system relies on open and honest feedback, but it's also positive feedback. There's a lot of data around 4-to-1 positive to negative feedback. So a lot of it's going to be, well done, Blake, mate, fantastic. Thanks for helping me out yesterday. Really appreciate it. Oh, fantastic. I love what you did last week. Can you help me out again tomorrow? So it's not, and I think this notion of feedback is often, and that's why people fear it, because we wait for so long to give it, and then we think the best feedback is always negative. No, that's completely wrong. A lot of our feedback, even at Melbourne, in my first year when we only won 4 games, there's a lot of positive feedback. Well done, great quarter. I remember coming in at halftime against the Sydney Swans, who were the juggernaut at that stage, and we kept them to 1 point in the second quarter of the MCG. I said, guys, that's fantastic. Like, that is elite defensive effort. And now half to half time they played better, but we had to reinforce that. So this notion of, I can never understand why people don't give each other feedback. It just doesn't, it's illogical. If we care about each other and we care about our company and we're really clear on our standards and our behaviours, and that's often the missing piece. Often the reason we don't give feedback is we're not sure what to give it on. But if we're really sure on our culture code, then we give it based on our culture code and our technical KPIs. One thing that I can't stand is 360-degree confidential feedback. What happens with that? I fill out a form. What do you reckon happens the next week? Blake, we're going to give you some feedback. We're not going to tell you it's from. The next 3 days, you're trying to work out who the feedback came from. Oh, who said that? Aren't you really? I mean, that's the biggest red flag for me. If a company does, confidential feedback, and then on the top of that, the surveys, which are completely confidential around what that other person does, you've got a poor culture. You should be able to give feedback face to face, right time, right way, right place, but it becomes a habit, a learned experience based on what we stand for as an organisation. But too many organisations don't really understand what they stand for. Then they wait for the 6-month review, and then they go, oh, yeah, you should have done this, you could have done that. Why didn't you do this? And the person sitting in front, why didn't you tell me that 5 months ago? So you're telling me that I've been doing this for 6 months? Well, yeah. You waited 6 months to tell me? It just doesn't make sense. Whereas footy clubs, the accountability model is just off the charts.
So what does it look like if we break that down? You obviously mentioned the culture code, which you guys do an incredible job now with kind of corporations. What would that look like, say, for the Bloods? And I know, correct me if I'm wrong, in your first year, you had a leadership team of 7, potentially. And what does it look like? So you've got the Bloods culture, which essentially is a different form of the culture code. Is the culture then broken down to behaviours, and then you assess players based on that behaviours? Is that essentially how it works?
Yeah. So we'll establish our culture code. We'll then vote for our leadership group based on the code, based on the behaviours, and then we'll assess all the players based on the technical capabilities of the game, which is some of the things I mentioned before, and the behaviours and the cultural behaviours, the culture code. And it'd be weekly. It's every week. Are you a Blood this week? Yes and no. And then the great thing about it is we'd have conversations, and sometimes players would say, no, I don't think I was. And we'd say, no, hang on, you've been hard on yourself, Blake. You played on such and such, you kept him down to 2 goals, did an amazing job. Yeah, but, I've made a couple of free kicks. Yeah, but, mate, hang on, we're not perfect here. We're saying, what you did was really significant. And, here's the code. Deliver on your word. Did you deliver on your word? Yeah, we did. Did you take shortcuts? No, I didn't. Did you play your role? Yeah, I thought I played my role. Mate, you're a Blood. So then you can establish really clear guidelines, and then, then you can keep moving forward. And if they're not a Blood, then you can work out why they're not, and then we can help you next week. The support mechanism is huge as well. It's not just feedback for feedback's sake. It's feedback for support as well. I didn't think you did that good a job, but, mate, we're going to help you this week. You're not in the team, but we want you back in the team. These are the things you need to work on, some of the technical side, but also, mate, if you want to be a part of the Bloods, you just have to deliver on your word, or whatever that behaviour is. So that's fundamentally the way it looks. And then often players would get peer assessed. They would get peer assessed by their teammates. And that was a really powerful session, and some incredible behavioural change through those peer assessments. We want you in the team, Blake, but you're just not doing this, and this. Oh, okay, yeah, no, Roosie told me that, but it's more powerful coming from your teammates, because you don't want to let down your teammates. There's this expectation that the boss, Roosie's got to tell me that. But Stewie Maxwell doesn't have to. Brett Kirk doesn't have to. What they want to tell you is how you're going to get in the team and how you want to be a good teammate. So incredible behavioural change, to the point where some players acted their way into the system and became premiership players based on that feedback.
I think it was Jared Murphy at the Cats when they the infamous, I can't remember what year it was, when Gary Ablett got his bit of feedback around, he thought he was training hard and he got his peer review and they kind of questioned otherwise. Was Jared, who's your business partner, part of that? He was there at that time, wasn't he?
Yeah, no, he was there at the time, and I think that's public in terms of what happened, and that's a great example. Gary Ablett, I think that from what I can read and what I've spoken to Murph, is basically his teammates told him, you could be the greatest player on the team, but you're lazy. But then the most important part of it was, we will help you get better. We will help you. Look at the change. Look at the transformation. He's the best player I've ever seen. Now, if he doesn't, and this gets back to my point before, how many people in the office could be way better if they've given feedback? And it's not fair on them. Gary Ablett became the best player I've ever seen. And probably wouldn't have had he not got that feedback. He's got 2 Brownlows hanging around his neck. Probably should have another couple had he not done his shoulder. And it's just an incredible player. And his teammates cared enough to give him the feedback. And then he cared enough to action it. They cared to support him. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah. For me, that's the best story that I've heard, and the best example that I've ever heard of it. And I guess the value of the peer assessment and review as well. How did you did that when everyone was at the D's, or is that a once a year type thing, or?
No, it's probably where you're at a little bit as a footy club. We certainly did a lot more at Sydney. Melbourne, particularly in the first year, was more educating around those behaviours that you touched on before, Blake. Like, what are they? We had to spend a lot more time explaining to players exactly what it looked like, educating in game day exactly what it looked like. So there was slightly, the model's the same, but the system, it's a bespoke sort of system, that we put in place, a performance by design, based on where you're at, really. So it was a little bit slower at Melbourne. Year 2, we started to give a bit more feedback. Year 2, we started to do some of the things that we did at Sydney. And then by year 3, there was a lot more sort of peer-to-peer feedback. But you've got to be really clear on what your behaviours are. And that's a really fundamental part of it, obviously.
One of the things, obviously never having been coached by you, but having spent a bit of time with you, that I love about your approach is it's not like the old school, like fucking blow up at everyone when they're doing a shit job. I don't even know how you go from a confrontation point of view, but one of the things that one of the stories you told me that just sticks in my mind is there doesn't need to be confrontation when you just refer back to the culture standards and the behaviours. Is that the mentality that you took into the Demons as well? Like, you don't need to blow up at someone. They know, and often players know when they've done the right thing or not, but coming back to that as your kind of reference point.
Yeah, if you haven't got a reference point, it becomes more emotional. Now, footy's emotional, let's be honest. And there's times that I was emotional. But I think because we were really clear on the system and really clear the way we wanted to play, so yes, there was frustration. But I also realised too that, I wrote down a list when I retired as a player, which was so important. 25 points of things I liked about my leaders and things I didn't like about the leaders. And that was important to hold me accountable when I became coach of the Sydney Swans. And I had that list in my desk for 8.5 years. And I took that list out when I coached Melbourne. And a lot of it was around being positive, staying calm. Your energy will rub off on the players. So having coached at Sydney, having written the list down, it certainly helped. But also having a great understanding of how you educate players. Most players want to be better. They want to get better. They want to be good. But honesty as well. You have to tell it like it is. And I had some really honest, difficult conversations with the guys at Melbourne. And 9 times out of the 10, they'd come in the next day and said, look, we appreciate the conversation. We're going to work harder, or I understand now. Have you got any more tips for me? And they're really good people. Some really good people that, again, probably don't get the credit. Jack Grimes, Jack Prengo, great young captains, great people. Well, and in my view, were let down by the system, let down by the footy club. Jack Watts was incredibly let down by the footy club. Let's be perfectly frank. I was there on Queen's birthday when he was unearthed as the saviour of the club. I happened to be scouting the game. We must have been playing Melbourne or Collingwood the next week. And I was there with Georgie Stone. We were just watching the game. I couldn't believe his parents were out getting interviewed. He came on the ground. And I only found out later he hadn't even been playing seconds. I think he'd been playing for Brighton Grammar or something. and it was a marketing ploy. He was let down by his footy club. Jack Grimes, Jack Tringo, I can go on and on and on, were let down by their footy club. And they were incredible, their commitment. And unfortunately, they didn't get there to see the premiership, but their commitment to changing the organisation, I couldn't have been more proud of some, even some of the guys that left, Jeremy Howe, Dunny, Lyndon Dunn, James Frawley, because they did it tough. They did it really, really tough. So really good people, and I hope they take some pride in also in what's happened at the footy club.
How have you, now with Performance by Design, how have you transferred that across to companies and organisations from, obviously a sporting club? Is it a direct transfer, or have you had to change certain ways that you go about, I guess, your systems to kind of transfer across to corporates?
Yeah, look, most of our work is in corporates, and my business partners have been working with corporates. With Jared Murphy, you mentioned, for 20 years, Emil, for probably 10 years. Carly's come out of the corporate world as well. You just got to be a bit slower, and it's not as immediate, and it's not as, they don't spend as much time on. In the footy club, the consultant's in there every single week. But the foundation's exactly the same. Setting your culture code, setting your behaviours. We do a lot of profiling, understanding yourself, understanding each other. We build relationships, really important to build relationships. And then on the back of those three things, then we start to have real talk. So it's a system that we put in place, and then it's rolls over, checking in, what's working, what's not working, and it continues. So the corporate world loves it. They really understand what we do because it's really nice and simple. They love the simplicity of it. They love the honesty of the people who work with us, and really we've just enjoyed working with some really, really good companies. Some of the biggest companies in Australia to some of the startups, which we really enjoy. But my message is always: the sooner you can do it, the better. The sooner you can define what your culture is, and build really strong relationships and have really honest conversations, do your profiling, understand yourself, understand each other, the better you're going to be. You have to do it, sooner rather than later.
Is it a common theme? I assume it is, that there's words on, their office and their board that talk about their values, but often just kind of words that are thrown up in terms of the filtering down process, words and values, but what does it actually look like when you break it down? Is that a common theme that you assess when you go into an organisation?
Yeah, look, you can tell the good organisations have their values, and then we work with them or develop their behaviours, but they live them. Yeah, the bad companies just have them on the board and they couldn't even recite them, to be honest. They wouldn't have a clue, never talk about them. And generally when we remind them of that, it is a bit of a moment for them. Yeah, we do need to commit to it. So there's a real want and desire, particularly on the back of what's happened over the last 18 months. There's this lack of connection, this lack of feeling part of a team. And I think the good companies have realised they've got through it really well. The poor companies with poor cultures have had a lot of staff leave. And now they're going, why have they left? And they realise, well, they've left because we've got a really bad culture. So we can't have them as just words on a board. We've got to start living and breathing our behaviours. And the companies that are doing it, you're having some really, really good results.
What did it look like, just to jump back to the footy circles again, what did it look like from your side of things in terms of how you had to show up? I've heard some fucking amazing stories from Melbourne Storm, and Craig Bellamy's often the first one in the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning, and obviously as a coach, not having to do that, but really showing up, and the results kind of speak for themselves in terms of the culture that they've had to hold. What did that look like from your side of things, more on a personal level?
I think it's the way you present as a leader. I think that's the really important part. The honesty, the communication. If you are going to give some tough feedback, and if assistant coach does it first, always follow up. But I mostly did it myself in terms of, selection, trying to give direction, solutions, rather than just pointing out problems all the time. So I think it's more, for me, it was more the way you show up as a leader. We talk about a lot of performance by design. Are you the leader you wish you had? Are you the leader you wish you had? And that was probably the foundation for what I wanted to be myself. would I want to lead myself? Would I want to play under me? And the 25 points I wrote down, am I living it and breathing it? So living your doctrine, walking your walk. I think that was the main thing, and that's the way, you have to show up, understanding your energy. If you're angry, your players are going to be on edge. If you're calm. So it's understanding what you mean to the team and what the team means to you and how you show up. You can't create an honest, hard-working environment if you're not. So whatever your behaviours and whatever your values and whatever your standards, it's got to be, all the coaches and all the players in it together. So we really tried to create a really inclusive, empathic, good relationships with everyone, but holding everyone accountable. To really, really high standards, and that's the toing and froing, relationship standards, and going backwards and forwards on those things.
If, as an outsider, and I don't know how involved you are now with the Ds, if you were to assess one or two behaviours or traits that you think was the difference between their 2000 and I think it was 18, the year that they made the prelim, and then falling down for a couple of years, and then this year, for me as an outsider but very passionate one, it looked like there was a real sense of unity and playing for each other, which would be an amazing trait. What do you see, again, as an outsider, which might be hard to answer, but what would you see as an outsider that you think was the catalyst for this year?
Yeah, I think if you looked at the previous 2 years, now bearing in mind there was a lot of injury, so let's put that in perspective as well. Let's put that. But if I'm an outsider looking out, it's gone from all about I. So I'm important. I'm the best player. I need to get a kick. Oh, why aren't I playing in the middle of the ground? Or why aren't I doing this? So for 2 years it was all about I. This year was about team. What can I do for my teammate? What's my role? I'm happy to play my role. I don't need the accolades. We want to be successful. And I suspect Maxi Gawn driving really high standards and Simon Goodwin. That would be my perception from an outsider's point of view, loosely. And I expect as a Melbourne Demons supporter, you probably feel somewhat similar.
Yeah, and even both things you touched on, listening to Darren Burgess talk, who, for those that don't know, he was I think his title's head of performance, which he literally oversees the strength and conditioning, the dietitians, the psychologists, all of those. He said something like they had of their best 22, they have the most time on the field in AFL history of their best 22, which says plenty for obviously him as an individual, but a little bit of luck in there as well of the collective. And I think he was
me. It's not Sam Burgess, it's Darren Burgess. Sam Burgess would.
Darren Burgess, different story.
But to me, Blake, let's get back to the team. If you remember the year before, and I don't want to single out a particular player, but one player ran a 13-minute, 14-minute 2K or 3K, sorry, and the whole season. That's your preparation. It's how you come back. Because people will talk about Darren Burgess or Paul Roos or Simon Goodwin or Alistair Clarkson or whoever it might be, or Dave Miss. Fundamentally, it's up to the players. Are they doing the right things in the off season? Are they doing their ice bars? Are they recovering? They're going to be the ones that dictate are they going to get on the field or not. I've seen it over and over and over and over and over again. I went to Fitzroy as a 17-year-old kid. Guess what? The most professional players played the most footy. Bernie Quinlan and Gary Wilson. It's not rocket science. Did we have good fitness staff? Yeah, absolutely. But they'd be the first to admit the players drove the standards at the Fitzroy Footy Club. And that's really probably my point a bit is, Simon's done an amazing job this year. Burjo's done an amazing job, but the players turned it around because the talent was there. The players made the decision that I'm going to come back fit and I'm going to do the things to get me on the field. And as a result, I'll tell you what, you get your best 22 on the field, it makes it a lot easier to win.
Well, that was my second point to it. I think at the end of the review, Burjo was talking about Max missing one session, and Max is very quick to correct. He's like, no, mate, I did it at 6 a.m. I had to go to a funeral that day. So when your captain, God knows how many preseason sessions they would have done, but when he doesn't miss a beat and the flow-on effect from that, says plenty as well. And I can only assume, again, you were in the circles much closer, that there's a similar culture at Geelong, Hawthorn and Sydney in your time, and probably in more recent time at Richmond. But I assume it on a macro scale that it's a culture thing.
Well, I think the boys at Sydney, of which Misso was one of them, and Burjo was at Sydney before he went to, I think Paul Melbourne was his next job. But Burjo, I've known Burjo for years and years and years. So the Sydney boys did a lot of research around the number of sessions. I think from memory it was 27 sessions pre-season allowed you to have your best season. So the data is there. It's unequivocal. Now, I can't talk to Hawthorn, Geelong and Richmond, but I can talk as a former player. If you don't get fit, it's very hard to have a really good season. So there's a lot of data around it. And then you play catch up. You just could, and then do we play them? Yeah, we better play them in round one, which happened to the Demons for those 2 years. They started playing players, which every coach does. Because you want your best players on the field, and you sort of know. I shouldn't pick them, but you do it. I've done it. Clarko would have done it. Goody would have done it. Dimmer would have done it. We've all done it. But the reality is, we know that it's fraught with danger, and we know there's a threshold of number of sessions that you have to complete in order to have your best season. And again, you get back to the teams that generally win, and they're healthy at the end of the year. They're healthy and they've had good years and they haven't had a lot of injuries. Or if they have had injuries, they've been able to get players back in the right time and healthy and fit. Bulldogs in 2016, I think it was, had a great run in, had the bye, and then got all their players back. So, healthy teams have generally, with talent, are winning teams.
Mate, before we wrap it up, if someone was listening, who might be a business owner or part of a corporate or even a footy club or any sport club, where would you start? I mean, the undercurrent and the common theme is you start with a kind of a culture and a behaviour. But what does that look like if someone, from maybe an organisation of 5 up to 500, where, other than obviously taking on the services of performance by design, which should be their number one priority, if for whatever reason they didn't take that path, what would it look like for them? Yeah,
look, it's got to start with your role models. All right. Now, in a small organisation, get everyone together and agree on a set of standards. This is what we're going to stand for. This is our purpose. This is why we exist. This is our values, and these are our behaviours. So if it's a small organisation, get everyone involved and be really honest with it and be really robust with it. If it's a big organisation, it's got to be your exec team or your board. The board, you got to start with the board, because if the board doesn't agree with your exec team, or the exec team doesn't agree with the general managers or whatever. So, and the higher up, the more you've got to be a role model. So if you're not living and breathing it, so you've got to have the discussion around what it looks like. It's incredibly important. And once we establish it, find a system of accountability, reward and challenge. Well done, Blake. Don't do that. Well done. Don't do that. And then it just becomes what we do. It just becomes the conversation that we have over and over and again. But establish it first. All right. What do we want to stand for as an organisation? Netball club, football club, whatever it might look like. And I say this, I've got some friends that have coached local footy clubs. And we've talked a lot about it. I said, have you spoken about drinking? Oh, what do you mean? I said, well, mate, you're a local footy club. Is drinking their priority? Well, I don't know what you mean. Well, mate, is it? Ask them. Are they there? A really good mate of mine was coaching a footy team. I said, do they really want to win a premiership? He said, what do you mean? I said, I bet you if you asked them directly, they're there to drink piss and socialise with their mates. So if that's the case, you have to establish that. That's what we're here to do. Winning is ancillary to, but again, how many sporting clubs say we're here to win a premiership, which is garbage, really. It really is. So my point is, whatever that organisation, and there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not criticising that club because, as you know, one of the great things about sport is the social side, the connections, the people you meet. But be honest enough to stand up in a meeting and go, I'm not here to win a premiership. I'm here to have beers on Saturday. I'm here to have a beer on a Saturday night, run around Saturday, train twice a week. That's what I'm here for. So you have to establish the ground rules around why you're there and what you exist to be able to do. And then if you win a premiership as a bonus, not to say you can't win one. Yeah, but if you do, it's a bonus. Do you understand what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. And that's, I mean, because one of the common themes, and I guess you would see this again as well, is like, it's easy to talk about your ideal values, but how you're actually showing up, there's often a gap between what you think you value and what your values are shown in terms of your behaviour.
Oh, I'll tell you a couple of stories. My brother played for, I hope he's not listening to this. He played for a footy club in a good standard, but a local footy club. So I called to talk to him on the Sunday. I said, mate, how'd you go? Nah, we got beaten. I said, oh, no. I said, oh, how was Thursday night? Yeah, no, we had a drink Thursday night. I said, oh, no worries. And then he talked a couple, geez, I'm dirty with Buffer and Smithy. I said, oh, what'd they do? Oh, they went to Donny Inn, got home at 3 a.m. in the morning for it. I said, oh, what, Thursday night? No, Friday night. I said, Simon, can you stop whinging about losing? Can you please? There's another story. I was there one day, another mate of mine played, and I loved him. I loved going up there, but I couldn't, because all their games were on a Saturday, so I couldn't go up there a lot, but I did. They were a great bunch of guys. And another really good mate of mine rolled his ankle really badly. Went to get the ice. They wouldn't give him the ice because the ice was for the beer in the esky after the game. And I'm like, guys, that's fine, but don't win when you lose. You're not there to win. Winning is just ancillary to why you exist as a footy club. And all I'm saying is have the conversation. Have the conversation and establish some really clear ground rules as to what you're going to stand for as an organisation.
It's what stands out to me, and I know you've had this conversation with different people in your family as well, is like, if you don't know your values, your actions will often tell you what your values or what you value. So that's you gave a perfect example of like, we value footy, we think we value winning, but our actions are leading to the beers, which means we either value more beers or we value what it brings in terms of connection, chat, whatever it might be. So you can easily identify, it's a brilliant exercise to go through in detail to really understand your values. But if you really want to look at it on a surface level, your actions are probably going to give you some insight into what your values actually are.
Yeah, I mean, I love that week where we did that at Momentum. I mean, it was really interesting to try to explain to the group of guys, work out what you do during the day and then do a bit of an audit at the end. And then if your values are completely different, I want to be supportive, and all you've done is yell at someone all day. Well, I'm not sure that's one of your values, because all day you've yelled at your staff and you want to be supportive. So there's a bit of a disconnect between what you're actually doing. So that's a really good way to do it. Do an audit at the end of the day and see what you're actually doing. See what your actions are, and are they matching what you think your values are? And if they're not, again, probably start the day with your values and say, okay, I want to be supportive. I'm going to have to change my behaviour, And again, it's the same concept. If you want to win, you have to change your behaviour. If that's the priority of the footy team, then don't go out on a Thursday and Friday night. But there has to be a change of action in order to support that value. You can't just put values on the wall and go, I'm really honest, and lie to everyone. I'm not sure it works that way.
Perfect, mate. That was brilliant and super insightful. So appreciate you taking the time out, and you can go and enjoy. G'day, Dylan. Look at that number.
Look at the.
Have a look.
I thought you wanted to interview me today, Blake.
Not today, mate. You can be next week. You're next week.
Okay.
First team, seconds.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah.
No worries.
We start at the top and we work our way down, big fella.
Thanks, Blake. Go Momentum.
Unbelievable. But mate, thanks for that. It was really insightful and gives people plenty of juice to think about when it comes to culture, leadership, behaviours, and changing themselves, I guess, first and foremost, and then potentially changing the organisation that they're part of as well.
Yeah, thanks, mate. And well done what you and Jay and Dylan are doing. It's been awesome being part of that too. So, because I know a lot of the stuff that you're doing, it really complements what we talk about as well. So you're making a difference. So keep doing what you're doing, mate. Well done.
Appreciate that, Reezy. Cheers, mate.
Thanks for tuning in this week. As always, if you enjoyed listening, please leave a review, give us a shout out across socials, or share with a friend so that we can continue to share these incredible conversations with more and more people.